Hello and welcome. You're watching Oneindia News. This is Global Chit Chat, our weekly show where we discuss the top developments in geopolitics in the recent weeks with our expert, Mr. Tridivesh Singh Maini. Hello, sir. Welcome back to our show.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
All right, so let's just dive right into it. So, former Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan has renewed his call for early elections, right? And the result in Punjab is a major blow for current Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. So, what can you tell us about the fate of the current Prime Minister of Pakistan and the entire situation in our neighboring country?
Okay. So the first thing is, this obviously it has given a boost to the PTI. A number of analysts are saying that, Imran Khan has managed to secure 15 seats out of 20 in these bad elections without any support, even financial support from some of the businessmen and who were close to him. But a couple of things need to be kept borne in mind. One is that at this point of time, the current government has also taken certain tough economic decisions which have not gone down well, with the people. So the removal of subsidies, for instance, on fuel, increasing inflation. So that's the first thing. The second thing which you need to see is that how does this over the next couple of months, for instance, specifically, sorry, how does the assistance from IMF and other countries, how will that pan out, and will that actually help in salvaging the situation of the economy? Because currently, if you look at it in terms of inflation, in terms of the slide of the Pakistani rupee vis-a-vis the dollar, uh, I mean, it's quite evident that many commentators are even speaking about the Sri Lanka like situation evolving. But if the current government can, you know, sort of deal with this with the economic crisis, at least sort of. I mean, obviously, it's going to take a long time to actually pull out the economy out of the woods, but to bring it to a manageable situation, I think that would be an achievement. And there's also a divide within some individuals within the ruling party felt that they should go ahead with early elections, while others have said that they should complete the term. Uh, the former PM Nawaz Sharif, who's also the brother of current Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, he also has said that it is, it's sort of time for introspection. So probably there's a sort of dilemma that how do you balance these tough decisions with certain decisions which may be popular. In at least in the economic sphere, it's going to be very tough to do that because any more populism and the crisis will only exacerbate. Now, one point which I wanted to make, while on the one hand, the IMF has sort of committed that to a certain amount that they will be releasing. I think it is 1.2 billion. But the problem at this point of time is there is a sort of some sources are saying that IMF has also imposed a conditionality that it will only now go ahead with the final release once it's sure that other countries commit that they will be providing Pakistan assistance. So Saudi Arabia had committed, China had committed, some amount to other countries had also committed. So that is if that Pakistan has denied this, but if there is any more conditionality now with regard to the IMF release of assistance, I think that is going to create a further problem. And even the perception, in terms of optics, the rising inflation, the slide of the rupee, the state of the stock market, that doesn't make for good. And if psychologically this sort of this thing builds up, that Pakistan is also heading towards the Sri Lanka like situation, so that's not very good in terms of perception. And arresting the economy is going to be an uphill task. So I guess there is a belief within the ruling party that if they can, as I said earlier, that if they can bring it to a manageable level, something which can be dealt with, maybe they will go in a better position when they go to the election. They'll have something to show. So that is.
Right, right, right. And so next we are coming to Russia, obviously. So on Tuesday, Russian President Vladimir Putin held meetings in Iran, right? And this is happening amid speculations that Iran is supplying weapons and drones to Russia. As Jake Sullivan also said this, in the US White House also mentioned this. So what can you tell us about this development and what is going on in there?
See, again, there is optics, there is symbolism, There is what what happens in the media, what is in the public eye, and then there are other ground realities, there are things. So the first thing is obviously Iran has supported Russia, right? So the religious leader Khomeini, he categorically said actually that it is not Russia, but it is the West to blame. Putin also tried to say that I didn't want this war, but the West, basically Europe and the US, have left me with no other options. He's also alluded to the US being intransigent with regard to the role of NATO in Eastern Europe, and he's also pointed out to European countries in private saying something and in public saying the other. So basically, that European countries were not on the same page as the US, but in public they've not been able to take a tough stance. So that's uh, and then obviously, as we've been discussing in previous weeks, Iran and Russia have been discussing economic cooperation.
Right.
So there was an MOU also signed with regard to oil cooperation between both countries. But the point is that so, as I said earlier, is Iran has managed to circumvent certain sanctions, and Russia also probably wants to take a cue from Iran, as to how to circumvent sanctions. But few points need to be borne in mind that on the one hand, both countries have their own interests. Some of their interests, their economic interests, may not be on the same. I mean, basically, they're at variance. Because Russia is categorically now part of this camp, of the China anti-West camp. Iran, on the other hand, is playing a sort of while yes, as far as the US is concerned, it's taken a very aggressive stance. But vis-a-vis some of the European countries, vis-a-vis even for instance, if you look at India also, India is also part, and in fact, this is India, Russia, Iran trilateral connectivity project and all also. So as far as geopolitics is concerned, there could be some differences. In fact, I I think we discussed this point also a few weeks ago, that how China was buying oil from Russia at much cheaper prices, and that impacted Iran. So there could be at this point of time, obviously, both for Russia and for Iran, they want to send out a message to the US. But if you look at the bilateral relationship, both in terms of strategic issues, on their geopolitical positioning, and in terms of economic interest, it's not that they're identical. So there will be differences. So a lot now actually, what really needs to be seen is that over the next, what I would keep a close eye on is first of all the Iran nuclear deal. So once it's clear, I mean, obviously now that the prospects are diminishing, that's what most analysts say. If there is no scope for that, then Iran will clearly more or less tilt towards the scam. Then, if you look at the level of cooperation, if you look at, for instance, the 20-year agreement which we've been speaking about earlier, Iran and Russia signing, then one can look at the content of that, and Iran will probably take a firm stance that it is going to, what it is called, its pivot to the east. It will clearly move in that direction. But as yet, I think there is still, some scope. So as yet, it is basically to a large degree, it is a sort of hedging by Iran. And as far as Russia is also concerned, it wants to show that obviously that they're not isolated. Though the US reaction right away to this meeting was that Russia is sort of isolated. US had categorically said that because there were differences between Russia and Turkey, and even Iran. So Iran and Russia were on the same page as far as Syria was concerned. So Erdogan raised this point about wanting to make a buffer zone in northern Syria to prevent any sort of attacks from the Syrian Kurds, and also with regard to there was the issue about refugees wanted to come into Turkey through that buffer zone. So there were differences on that between Iran on the one hand and Turkey, and Russia on the other. So that is another thing. I think that was an important feature of this meeting. But largely, I think the overall the statements emanating from both sides, as far as Russia and Iran are concerned, they were along predictable lines. But I would also like to make another point here that yet again that Turkey,
Hmm.
uh, like Indonesia, is trying to play the role of a sort of mediator.
Media.
To right? So again, when we focus a lot on great powers and we focus on uh, many other, it's very interesting to see how, in spite of its economic problems,
Hmm.
Turkey, in geopolitical terms, how it is still, obviously it remains relevant, and
Hmm.
not only in the Middle East but beyond. One has
Hmm.
a sort of Erdogan reiterated the point about, because they're trying to build a corridor in the Black Sea which can facilitate the because supply of wheat from Ukraine, because that is impacting Africa, that's impacting other parts of the world. Because and
Right.
there are certain, I mean, obviously certain regions which are dependent upon
Hmm.
Ukraine. Significant, I mean, there's a great dependence upon them, right? So that is a very important role. But on the other hand, what Erdogan is doing is he's playing that role, but he's also trying to leverage on the fact that Russia is busy with
Hmm.
the Ukraine crisis. So as far as Syria is concerned, he's trying to uh, build to
Hmm.
pitch for
Hmm.
pushing obviously what he considers as Turkish interests. And obviously, a couple of weeks ago, even the Indonesian president had also visited both Ukraine and Russia. So I think countries, so basically countries like Indonesia and Turkey have a very important role. And in the midst of all this, the Ukraine crisis, Russia being bogged down over here, China having domestic problems, US also have, I think if you look at the global order, it's really, I mean, we are no longer, I mean, it's a cliche to say we are no longer in a bipolar world, but
Ah.
we are heading towards somewhere between what one would call a bipolar world and a multipolar world, somewhere between the two. And it's going to be, it's all based on interests. You can't
Hmm.
still look at geopolitical events from a black and white prism.
Right, right. That was my question actually, and you answered it right away. That are we heading to a bipolar world? Correct. So speaking of Middle East, sir, let's just dive right into UAE. The UAE passport has been ranked as the 15th most powerful in the world with a visa-free or visa on arrival score of 176. So now, can you just simply tell our viewers what is having a score of 176 mean, and also how does UAE remain the strongest in the Gulf Cooperation Council region?
Okay, so there are these, you have these rankings with regard to competitiveness of the passport and so. Now, this is based on how many countries you don't need a visa for. So
Hmm.
basically, so for instance, you don't need a visa if you have a UAE passport. You don't need a
Hmm.
visa for 176 countries. Now,
Okay.
UAE's ranking has been consistently improving.
Uh-huh.
In 2012, I think 2012, it was probably 64 if I'm not mistaken, and it has
Okay.
jumped to this level of 15 now in the
Hmm.
top 15. So obviously, it's the most competitive now as far as the GCC is concerned.
Hmm.
So I think what is also now this, as far as immigration is concerned, we know, GCC countries function very differently. They don't
Hmm.
have any concept of uh, like, only now they've started long-term visas as far as immigrants are concerned. So you basically only get a passport or what is proper residency if you're actually born there. Others,
Hmm.
outsiders, they have work visas and things like that. So this passport needs to be looked at from the from not from the notion of how, it really doesn't impact outsiders, because immigrants will still not be eligible. They are getting long-term visas, like we discussed. There's something called golden visas, and which are
Hmm.
10 years and all that. But passports, they have a very clear immigration policy. This ranking, essentially, it raises UAE's prestige
Hmm.
and UAE's sort of soft power,
Hmm.
globally. And it doesn't change as far, it doesn't really change the its immigration policy per se, because as I've explained earlier. But what this does is that, so for instance, if you look at the recent years, what has been happening is this report points to a couple of other points also. One,
Hmm.
that the UAE has handled the pandemic really well, much
Hmm.
better than other countries, many other countries. It was amongst the first to open up travel. It was amongst the first to remove restrictions. If you look at high net worth individuals also from different countries, UAE is a preferred destination. Now, these two are not. these points are not directly linked. I think this is a chain of achievements. In the last year, I mean, a lot of people have not been paying much attention. But as we've discussed, things like the golden visa, wanted to attract more professionals, wanted to attract more entrepreneurs. Even for freelancers, they've made changes, and doing that in the midst of the pandemic, and also having a clear vision that you have to reinvent yourself, that you can't be dependent upon any one just on natural resources or whatever. So I think in that sense, it is a great achievement, and it only bu- builds up, it helps in building the sort of the brand of UAE as such.
Right, right. Okay. Thank you so much for the information that you've imparted us with us today, and catch us again on next week on Global Chit Chat, and thank you for watching One India News.